G'day and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life, and behind me here is my K24 powered Accord, and to my right here is what looks like a fairly standard New Zealand new Integra Type R, and over here is a fairly standard looking JDM EP3 Civic Type R. Now naturally my car has a K24 and these cars normally came with the red top K20A, but today the Integra and the Civic are joining the ranks of my Accord because both of these cars have been K24 swapped. So this is going to make for a very interesting comparison. Starting here with this K24 swapped DC5. Now with this one being quite a rare car, it's actually New Zealand new, which differs slightly from the JDM ones. The JDM ones had the red top K20A, but this one actually, because it's New Zealand new, came with a K24A2, which made a little bit less power, but in general is a very similar engine. Well, the owner of this one took out the K20 and put in a K24 block, but kept the K20 head, paired it up with the K20A PRB manifold and a Mugen Airbox along with an exhaust, and overall this is probably making around about 160 or so kilowatt to the crank. The EP3 on the other hand is all K24. It's a K24 block and a K24 head, but it has been built. It's got, you know, new valve springs, retainers, cams and all that kind of stuff, along with a 50 degree VTC actuator. And it's also paired with an RBC manifold off an Accord Euro R, and it obviously has an intake and a bigger throttle body as well, along with a Mugen twin loop exhaust system. This one here, because of the built head and so on, and the fact it's also running an AEM ECU, probably means that it's going to be making a little more than the DC5, say about 180, 190 kilowatt. And finally, my Accord has a completely stock internally K24A3. In terms of the modifications that I've done to it, it has a reflash to tie in all of the other modifications, like an intake, a header, and an exhaust system. And then, like I mentioned, I've also put Type R ratios in this car. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have a limited slip diff as well, but it does at least have the same gears that you get in these two cars. In terms of power, I'd probably be putting it somewhere in the middle, maybe around about 165 kilowatt. Briefly discussing the interior of the EP3, I have to say, frankly, it does feel like almost like a bit of a minivan in here. The roof is really high. You've got this big, long, just flat roof. It doesn't feel like a coupe at all. You can tell definitely that it is a hot hatch. These seats are a lot more comfortable than the ones that you find in the DC5. They aren't as aggressively bolstered, which I really like, and I love the position of the shift knob. It falls so easily to hand. The Momo steering wheels on these is really awesome, and I love the gauges on these. Goes all the way to 8,500 RPM. The Accord's interior is by far the least sporty but the most comfortable and well put together. All of the switchgear and everything feels really nice. The steering wheel is the biggest and probably not the nicest to use because it feels like a bit of a bus steering wheel, but you have all these features here on the inside that's absolutely fantastic. The seats though are definitely my favourite part about this car. They're a nice grippy fabric, so they still hold you in really well. You don't feel like you're sliding out of your seat, but they are extremely comfortable, much more so than the Recaros and the two Type R cars. And finally, the DC5. It's by far the most driver-centric car. The gauges are right in front of you. You know, the way the tach and speedometer are both right in the middle, whereas those other cars, they're sort of a small one off to the side. And I love the fact that the climate control is up here. It's such a unique design and looks really cool. The shift knob is in a perfectly placed position, and the driving position is definitely lower than the other two cars. It feels more small and sporty here on the inside. It's by far the most uncomfortable and impractical of the bunch, but definitely the best driver's feeling car on the inside. This is definitely faster. Alrighty, driving the K24 swapped EP3 Civic Type R. Let's see what the almighty K24 sounds like. That is unquestionably a lot faster than mine, that's for sure. Those camshafts make a huge difference to the way the VTEC sounds, and it has a light and fly within it as well, so it's just immediate response. Wow, the VTEC sounds amazing. Steering feel, I mean, obviously this one I presume is electric because I didn't see any hydraulic pumps under the bonnet, and you can definitely tell it doesn't feel quite as direct as some of the other cars that I've driven, but it's a nice, quick, zippy steering rack, which I like. And above all else, it's actually really quite comfortable, which is really nice. That was my big complaint that I had with my DC5, was that awesome car to drive, but those seats were just, oh man, they just gave me some really substantial back problems, eh? Whereas this, the seats are a lot more comfortable, the ride is a lot less crashy, but the cool part is that, of course, you still get the absolutely nutty engine. This is definitely the best K24 that I've driven, in the fact that it still feels like a K20A, where with my car, you know, at least compared with like a Euro R, it's not quite as visceral sounding at the top end. It sounds a bit more sort of bland, because it is a bigger, less revvy engine. But this one sounds fantastic. And it is really fast. Oh my god. Not a great start. The clutch on this car is quite different to what I'm used to. But the power is quite something. Just so effortless, so easy. You can literally bang gears and your passengers will think it's an automatic. And I don't know what it is, because my car is not like that. My car, when you bang gears, is really lurchy. This, on the other hand, and the S2000 and the EP3 were all just so smooth and just instant, razor sharp response. And what this really highlights is that, man alive, how good would it have been if Honda put out like a proper K24A, like a, you know, a K20A but with more displacement right from factory. And I guess because Honda never really made a K24A as such, it's been up to the aftermarket scene to sort of create it for you. And oh my goodness, is it something special. So good. Just, it goes through the gears so quickly. And you just have this really smooth linear power that just pulls for days. Definitely in terms of how the DC5 compares with the others, the driving position is definitely better, but it is also the most uncomfortable. But there's no denying that this is the most raw and probably best handling of the bunch. Wrapping up the DC5 versus EP3 versus CL9 video. If we start off with the pros and cons of the DC5, the pros, it is the sports car of the bunch, which means that it looks the best. That coupe body style is just something you don't see on the roads anymore, with everyone buying SUVs and hatchbacks, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. And it also has the best steering feel, definitely the best driving position, the seats hold you in the best, it's got the best handling. It's just overall just a joyous car to drive. The disadvantages, because it is a sports car, it is by far the most uncomfortable. The ride in that is really hard and just crashy over bumps. The seats in my mind are horrendously uncomfortable. I get severe backache problems when I get out of it. And in my mind, it just didn't have the most exciting K24 I've ever driven. That Mugen Airbox kind of dulls a lot of the induction noise quite a bit. And you know, it sounds good, but I wouldn't say it sounds as good as the EP3 or my CL9. Speaking of the CL9, my car is definitely the daily driver of the bunch. It's the car you'd want to drive every single day. It's got by far the most amount of features and definitely the nicest feeling interior. It's got by far the most comfortable seats. It's also the most practical. The disadvantages is that it's probably the most boring. It's not a sports car by any means. I've modified to make it quite sporty, but it's still nowhere near on the level of the other two. And it is also a bit of a couch through corners still. It handles pretty good and the tyres really help, but it's not as good as the other two. And it also has the longest gears and is the heaviest. And finally, the EP3. This was my favourite of the bunch. It had by far the most exciting K24 I have ever driven, but it was surprisingly comfortable. The seats weren't too aggressively bolstered down here like they are on the DC5. They're quite a different seat. And really the only con is that it doesn't look the best, but it's more practical than the DC5, and I was deeply impressed. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. So there we go. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life, and I will look forward to seeing you again next time.